In 1999, Wild Wild West brought to the screen a steampunk comedy set during the Reconstruction of the United States. Salma Hayek plays Rita Escobar, who moves through the narrative as an ally of Agents West and Gordon. The film blends anachronistic gadgets, pop soundtrack, and industrial spectacle, but received criticism for its uneven humor and scattered plot. On the left, Mary Catherine Harrony, later known as Big Nose Kate, appears at age 15, alongside her younger sister Wilhelmina on the right, in a portrait dated 1865. The image records a moment prior to her notoriety in the American West, when she still lived under her birth name, and family ties shaped her path. With the advance of railroads westward in the 19th century, flows of settlers followed the tracks, attracted by cheap freight, land, and new trade routes. Grabble's photograph captures the horseshoe curve under the Buckhorn Mountains, documenting the connection between infrastructure, migration, and federal policy in the reorganization of the territory. In Pine Ridge, South Dakota, a public school stands next to a small camp of Oglala Tipis. There, coexistence reveals historical layers. The Lakota presence maintains territorial and ritual ties, while the school buildings symbolize educational policies imposed since the 19th century, marking tensions and adaptations in daily life. Maddie Silks became one of the best-known madams of the West by managing brothels in Kansas and Colorado between 1860 and 1880. She worked the gold rush circuits, where the imbalance between men and women increased demand. Her activity was part of the emerging urban economy and coexisted with variable local regulations. In the camp, a singular scene was recorded. Mining engineers, accompanied by their wives, gathered at dusk for an improvised concert. They used instruments brought in caravans and familiar songs. On the edge of the circle, some domesticated deer, common in the region, remained tame, watching the gathering. Martha Jane Burke, known as Calamity Jane, was a frontier figure in late 19th century America. She worked as a scout and guide in the Black Hills and lived in Deadwood. In the 1895 image, she appears in men's clothing, an indication of her work practices and her transgression of gender conventions. She also took part in exhibitions that expanded her legend. In 1859, at the age of 27, Julia Boulette moved to Virginia City in the Nevada Territory, spurred by the discovery of the Comstock lode. She arrived amid an influx of miners, merchants, and services, settled downtown, and soon became a well-known figure in a community transforming from a temporary camp into a structured city. In a U.S. Army exercise, soldiers of Company C, 3rd Infantry Regiment, move in a wedge formation near Fort Meade, Maryland. Each soldier keeps his rifle ready and observes the designated sectors, while the group adjusts spacing, seeks cover, and consolidates the line to advance to the next checkpoint. Frank E. Webner, a Pony Express rider, served around 1861 at the height and end of the service. He rode stretches between stations, changing horses every dozens of miles to speed up mail delivery between Missouri and California. He faced weather, robberies, and the tension of the Civil War. The telegraph, completed in 1861, ended the route. Maggie Hall, a prostitute born in Dublin, was part of the post-famine Irish migration wave. In 1873, she embarked on a transatlantic route and landed in New York, then a hub of precarious labor and moral surveillance. Her early trajectory reflects compatriot networks, cheap tenement rentals, and entry into the urban sex market in 5 points. In 1888, in Deadwood in the Black Hills region, residents, railroad workers, and officials marked the completion of a new stretch of railway with a parade down Main Street. Marching bands led the procession, followed by decorated wagons and company banners. The event signaled regional integration and the promise of shipping minerals and goods. Peace Council, indigenous chiefs who agreed to end the conflict with the U.S. Army. In council, they sought to cease hostilities, protect villages, and ensure safe passage. Among the leaders were Standing Bull, High Hawk, Whitetail, Little Thunder, and Lame, whose decisions shaped the transition from war to lasting negotiation. In the photograph Freight Transport in the Black Hills, A convoy of ox-drawn wagons crosses the route between Sturgis and Deadwood. The record documents regional logistics. Drivers guide the animals, supplies and tools are stacked, and the dusty trail connects markets to mining fronts forming across the hills. Mary Catherine Harany, a Hungarian born in 1850, migrated as a child to the U.S. and after orphanhood, wandered through the Midwest. Around 1870, as an adult, she adopted the name Kate and worked in saloon houses between Kansas and Texas, learning English and surviving on the fringes of the law. Years later, she became linked to Doc Holliday as a prostitute and occasional singer. Comanche, horse of the 7th Cavalry, became a symbol after the Battle of Little Bighorn in 1876. Wounded, he was the only horse recovered from Custer's forces. The regiment issued an order to keep the animal retired at Fort Riley with care and honors, and display him in ceremonies as long as he lived, as a lesson of memory and discipline. In 1889, in Rockerville, Dakota, the scene records daily mining routine. Pans dipped into the stream bed, sediments washed in circular motions to separate gold flakes. 3 veterans, Spriggs, Lamb, and Dillon, pose with their work tools, reflecting techniques inherited from the 1876 rush and the persistence of the local economy. Portrait of Laura Bullion, criminal of the American West, known for being part of networks linked to Butch Cassidy's gang. In 1893, she joined the group during the phase of train and bank robberies that marked the late frontier. The image records a female participant in illicit circuits and urban survival at the end of the 19th century. Mattie Blaylock, born Celia Ann, began as a sex worker in the Kansas Territory, and around 1871 joined Wyatt Earp. They lived as a couple for almost 8 years following his moves through the West, while he alternated between duties as a lawman and professional gambler. Their relationship ended when Earp left with Josephine Marcus. In the 1880s, John C.H. Grable photographed the stagecoach known as the Deadwood Coach, active in the Dakota Territory. The image shows passengers in hats and coats on the roof and inside, a sign of urban etiquette on a frontier route. The vehicle, used for mail and Black Hills mines, highlights the transition between trails and railroads. In 1891, the camp known as Villa of Brule housed Lakota Sioux groups near the Pine Ridge Reservation. The photographic record places tippies and domestic activities alongside the well at White Clay Creek. The scene reflects the post-Plains Wars period, with federal control and forced adaptation to reservation policies. Record of a mini Conjou band, known as Bigfoots, performing the grass dance on the banks of the Cheyenne River, in open field, near indigenous camps and military posts. With drum and responsorial singing, they set the rhythm for Lakota dancers. Soldiers of the 8th Cavalry and 3rd Infantry watched, establishing presence and surveillance. Martha Jane Burke, the famous Calamity Jane figure of the Old West, appears in 1890 in Deadwood, South Dakota, visiting the grave of James Wild Bill Hickok. The scene synthesizes frontier ties. She, a guide and scout; he, a gunfighter killed in 1876. The act, part of memorials with audience and press, helped cement their biographies in popular culture. Belle Brezing, famous Madam of Lexington, Kentucky, was active between the late 19th and early 20th centuries. She ran brothels frequented by politicians and businessmen, prospering under flexible local regulations. Her notoriety grew nationwide with moralist campaigns and police raids that marked the decline of the trade. This week in Montana history, in 1915, residents of the state debated in the state legislature a referendum that banned manufacturing, transporting, and selling alcohol. The debate crowned decades of mobilization by temperance leagues, which demanded classifying alcohol as dangerous, alongside explosives, poisonous drugs, and spoiled food. In 1906, the Little Brown Store in Englewood, Colorado, operated as a neighborhood grocery and meeting point. In the shadow of railroad expansion and the late mining boom, it sold groceries, tools, and fabrics. The wooden counter tallied tabs. Children traded coins for candy while neighbors discussed harvests and local news. On the banks of the Upper St. Mary, in what is now Glacier National Park, a Blackfoot village raised conical tipis aligned with the wind. At the end of the 19th century, families hunted, tanned hides, and traded provisions with nearby posts. Shamans conducted seasonal rites while elders recounted migrations and pacts, recording tensions with United States authorities.